Hello everyone and welcome to Envision Academy. Today we are doing the newspaper analysis or the editorial analysis of the Assam Tribune newspaper of the 11th February 2026. Now, this topics for today are BVG Ramji scheme. We'll look into it in detail. I mean detailed some BVG Ramji scheme. আৰু UGC equity regulations কি হয় বহুত ডিবেটত আছিল বহুত কন্ট্ৰভাৰ্চিয়েল আছিল সুপ্ৰিম কোৰ্টে ষ্টেও লগাইছিল সো ইয়াৰ বিষয়ে আমি বহুতখিনি ডিটেইলছত চাম ওকে the major debates over here surrounding here and turning rooftops into power. So এটা editorial asile bahut dunia power sector logot related. So these three will be covered here. So let's begin BVG Ramji scheme. Ami yate prelims or mains perspective to perspective jate ami sab so mains perspective apor pura analyze kora jabo and apunalok mains practice question o ami provide kora ase. So video to sabo end loke kekholoke sabo. Let's begin. Now this article BVG Ramji scheme framed as gender inclusive law. It's important from GS paper 2, GS paper 3, GS paper 1, rural urban migration and social empowerment, women's participation in workforce and essay paper. Okay, so article 2 ki koi ase ami in depth sum. Okay, so BVG Ramji bill scheme actually act ki hoy ami in depth sum tar pisot ami discuss korim je kenake etu gender inclusive law hoy ki ko ase ami discuss korim. Let's begin. So what is BVG Ramji Act 2025? Your full name to whole Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission Gramin Act 2025. It is a new rural employment law that aims to replace koi ase kat MGNREGA Act jotu asile MGNREGA Act National Rural Employment Guarantee Act Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act it yak replace koi kine yak ana hoise BVG Ramji Act which has been operational since 2006 MGNREGA to since 2006 it was operational. Now why is the government changing the name? Name change korise ne provisions change korise ne kyo change korise am sam baro to change kyo korise actually government koi ki ase je MGNREGA made in 2005 does not match today's rural reality rural scenario ko match nokore bole MGNREGA rural poverty rural garibi ase it has been reduced and digital access has increased but the scheme still faces serious problems like misuse of funds weak monitoring I mean middleman or system dekhi asu weak monitoring aro poor quality assets leakages and corruption so juntu kaam hoye ase MGNREGA etu effective hua nai ba kame hua nai paisa pa ase ba paisa poa nai kaam koi ase to teneko bahut beya hai so to address all those things this has been changed into BVG Ramji Act. Now in fiscal year 2024-25 around rupees 193.67 crore was misappropriated. So jate bahut kine jekini beneficiary asile heke napale ba corruption hole ekini paisa gayab hol okay so ekini paisa kodlo. So only 7.61% of households completed the full 100 days of work. Only 7.61% 100 days of work complete koise. Now the new system, this BVG Ramji Act aims to improve accountability. So self-explanatory keywords I explain koribo na jao. Use technology for transparency. Ekini apuni look directly means bahai dibo paribo. This is a very probable topic BVG Ramji Act. Mention ta question to bonibo ebar. Improve accountability, use technology for transparency, ensure better monitoring, focus on durable and useful assets, create a more structured and efficient rural employment system. Now, what is a major change compared to MGNREGA? BVG Ramji Act ki kora asile MGNREGA 100 days of guaranteed employment asile aru BVG Ramji Act 125 days kori dia hoise 25 din borai kine kori dia hoise focus was on wage employment aru BVG Ramji wage employment durable asset creation and skilling kora jabo okay. Now যদি কোডে যে কি চেঞ্জেস হৈছে একিনি আপোনালোকে ডাইৰেক্ট লিখিব পাৰে বা প্ৰিলিমছত যদি আহে আপোনালোকে শুদ্ধ উত্তৰটো ডাইৰেক্টলি মাৰ্ক কৰি দিব পাৰে women participation 33% minimum in MGNREGA and BVG Ramji mandatory কৰি দিয়া গৈছে যে 33% mandatory stringent provisions with stringent provisions so কি provisions আছে women gender equality কৰিব কাৰণে এটো আমি চাম. Now employment guarantee is increased by 25 days per rural household per year. Now expansion of guaranteed employment days আমি যেটো দেখিছো যে 100 days আছিল আগতে আৰু স্পেশাল কেসেস কিছুমান আছিলে জাস্ট লাইক drought or disaster areas plus 50 days কৰি দিয়া আছিলে আৰু up to 150 days আছিলে for certain ST households in forest areas. These were exceptions not general entitlement. General entitlement was 100 days of work per rural household per year. Now BVG Ramji Act কি কৰি দিয়া গৈছে 125 days guaranteed per household standard statutory right কোনে দিয়া গৈছে statutory right by law okay not dependent on disaster or special category যেনেকৈ আগতে exception আছিলে তেনেকুৱা একো নাই direct 125 days guaranteed per house guaranteed work per household. Sorry changes in center state funding rule etu change aise je earlier system center 100% of unskilled wages pay koisile but aru state koisile unemployment allowance 25% of material costs and state administrative factors ekini state saisile now etia ki koi dia goise proposed sharing under BVG Ramji Act And 90:10 divided in between center and states, 90% by the center and 10% by the states for northeastern states, Himalayan states and Union Territory legislature. So এইখিনি কাৰণে কি কৰি দিয়া গৈছে 90:10 আৰু 60:40 কৰি দিয়া গৈছে 60 by the center and 40% by the states for all other states and all other UTs with general UTs with legislature. 100% central funding for UTs without legislature. So এইটো structure হয়. Statutory pause during peak farming seasons. So কিবা এটা নতুন এটা বস্তু ইন্ট্ৰডিউস কৰি দিয়া গৈছে চাব section 6(1) it says that no public work will start or continue during peak agricultural seasons. So very important to note that কোনো public work দিয়া নাযাব during peak agricultural seasons. These are the main sowing and harvesting periods. Its purpose to কি হয় এইটো আনা যে to ensure enough labor is available for farming, so that enough labor is available for farming. Okay, now what section 6 clause 2 says, then it says that every state must notify in advance the peak farming period. So state কি কৰিব লাগিব যে notify কৰিব লাগিব যে এইটো আমাৰ peak farming season হয়, maybe April May বা হয় না June July, so September October, so যিখিনি হয় আৰু এইটো আমাৰ farming season হয়, so this 60 days আমি pause কৰিব লাগিব এইটো. So states must notify in advance. Total pause period must add up to 60 days in one financial year. So ভাগ কৰিও ক'ব পাৰে. This 60 days will cover sowing season and harvesting season. Okay. Now flexibility in notification. The pause period can differ. The pause period to এনেকুৱা নহয় কি rigid over যে এইখিনিতে হ'ব. So different states, different districts, different blocks, different gram panchayats, different agroclimatic zones, different local cropping patterns. So এইখিনি best কৰি কিনে the pause period to differ কৰিব. This means timing can change depending on local farming conditions. Now এটা বস্তু কি এইটো বস্তু legally binding কৰি দিয়া গৈছে যে all planning and executing authorities are legally required to follow this rule. Very much important to note that it is legally binding. So that's a very important pointer, prelims pointer for UPSC, upcoming UPSC prelims and upcoming APSC prelims also, and or any other governmental exam. Okay, so এইটো এটা নতুন provision এটা add কৰা গৈছে, and it is all executing authorities are legally required to follow this rule. No work can be done during the notified pause period, and works must be scheduled only outside these 60 days. Okay. Now এটা বস্তু কি কৰি দিছে এবাৰ যে labor budget is replaced by the normative allocation. So আগতে labor budget আছিলে, normative allocation কি হয়? Normative allocation মানে কি হয়? Normative allocation, what is it? Central government decides a fixed yearly fund limit for each state. So আগতে central government কৈ দিব যে এইখিনি ফান্ড হয়, এইখিনিতে আপোনালোকে কৰিব লাগিব for each state. So it is based on objective parameters like population, need, etc. Now আৰু এইটো কি কয়? Fixed amount to কি কয়? Normative allocation. So এইখিনি কৰি দিলে কি ভাল হ'ব কি বেয়া হ'ব আমি এইটো ডিসকাস কৰিম in detail আপোনালোকে চাই থাকক. Now what section 4 clause 5 says that center will decide state-wise fund allocation every financial year. States cannot automatically demand unlimited funds. So states ক'ব নোৱাৰে যে আমাক এইখিনি ফান্ড লাগিব, these are the funds you are demanding. Okay, states cannot automatically demand unlimited funds. What section 4 clause 6 says, if a state spends more than its allocated limit, the extra cost must be paid by the state government. So এইটো ভাৰটো কাৰ ওপৰত আহিব? State government. যদি মই এক্সট্ৰা খৰচা কৰিম rural employment জেনেৰেশ্যনৰ কাৰণে আৰু পইচা মই লগাওঁ, তে মই এইটো পইচা নিজে দিব লাগিব। ওকে, ষ্টেট গভৰ্ণমেণ্টে নিজে দিব লাগিব, চেণ্টাৰে এইটো কি বুলি কয় একাউণ্টেবিলিটিটো বা ৰেচপনচিবিলিটিটো নলয়। চ' আৰ্লিয়াৰ চিষ্টেমত কি আছিলে মনৰেগাত লেবাৰ বাজেট মডেলটোত ফাণ্ডিং ৱাজ ডিমাণ্ড ড্ৰিভেন। ইফ মোৰ পিপল ডিমাণ্ডেড ৱৰ্ক, বেছি যদি ডিমাণ্ড আহে ৱৰ্কৰ কাৰণে, যে তেন্তে চেণ্টাৰে কি কৰিছিলে প্ৰভাইডেড মোৰ ফাণ্ডছ। চ' এতিয়া এই বস্তুটো ষ্টেট গভৰ্ণমেণ্টৰ ওপৰত হেৰি দিছে। চ' সেইটো অকণমান এণ্টি ফেডাৰেলিজম টাইপৰ। No strict upper cap. It was a rights-based, open-ended system. Okay. Now, gender-focused provisions. এইখিনি আমাৰ আৰ্টিকেলতো কথা কোৱা গৈছে যে gender focused or gender inclusive হয়। So কেনেকৈ হয় কি হয় আমি ইয়াতে ডিটেইলত চাওঁ। So first is minimum 1/3 women beneficiaries. At least 33% of total beneficiaries must be women. So very important to note that 33% of total beneficiaries must be women. Special job cards, issuance of special job cards to women-headed households and single women. Now, number 3, separate schedule of rates, distinct wage rate norms tailored for women workers. So very important to note, এটা ডাইৰেক্টলি কোৱেশ্চন বনি যাব পাৰে যে বিবিজি ৰামজি এক্ট কেনেকৈ জেণ্ডাৰ ইনক্লুচিভ হয়। চ' এইখিনি পইণ্টছ আপোনালোকে লিখি দিলে আপোনালোকে ফুল মাৰ্কছ পাব। Separate schedule of rates, distinct wage rate norms tailored for women workers. Number 4, mandatory creche facility এইটো থাকে যে required at work sites if 5 or more children under 5 years accompany women workers. So women workers যদি তেওঁলোকৰ চিলড্ৰেন আহে under 5 years to creche, mandatory creche facility থাকিব লাগিব at work sites. Now number 5, women in supervisory roles. women encouraged to work as maths worksite supervisors. So it will both important as supervisory roles assign kora jabo women no, they will be encouraged to do supervisory roles also. Number 6, representation in councils. 1/3 representation of women in Central Employment Guarantee Council and State Employment Guarantee Council. So তাতো 1/3 representation of women থাকিব. Now number 7, gender sensitive grievance redressal mechanism to address discrimination, harassment and violation of workers rights. So এইখিনি বস্তুৱে কি কৰে বিবিজি ৰামজি এক্টক জেন্ডাৰ ইনক্লুসিভ বনায়, হেতু কৈছে গভৰ্ণমেণ্টে কয় লোকস সভা. Now expected impacts of BBG Ramji on the rural sector. So কি benefit হবো rural sector আমি চাওঁ, তাৰপিছত criticism চাম, criticize কৰিম. Okay, the government believes the new law will boost rural jobs, income and infrastructure. More employment and higher income expected হয়. Employment guarantee increased to 125 days. So more work হলে কি হ'ব, more wages হ'ব আৰু better household income হ'ব, way of life, standard of living upgrade হ'ব বুলি আমাৰ আশা আছে. Special focus on women and women headed households. Yes. And better rural infrastructure, water conservation projects aibo, irrigation structure should be made, rural roads will be enhanced, rural markets or hearts will be developed, storage facilities will be get developed with time. Livestock and fisheries infrastructure are also in the pipeline of development, and climate resilient assets are also getting upgraded or created. Okay, these are meant to support farming and local businesses. How ki hobo impacts? Higher agricultural productivity hobo. How? Through improved water management, better connectivity to markets, storage facilities to reduce crop loss, support for allied activities like dairy and fisheries. Now, its goal is to increase farm output and rural earnings. Aru reduce distress migration. So distress hoi kine migrate hoy na manula gaawar para sohor le, ago sohor para gaon le, jo employment ta talasat. So more local employment generation hobo, ekane distress migration reduce hobo boli koise government. Better village level infrastructure, stronger livelihoods, expected result, fewer people forced to migrate to cities for work. Now another thing is technology driven transparency, digitized planning kora goise here, and online payments hobo, directly real time monitoring hobo, then faster grievance redressal is their main purpose to hold to ensure transparency, right, and accountability. It will reduce corruption, ensure timely payments and improve accountability. The farmers are key benefits, especially for farmers. Better labor availability. States can pause public works up to 60 days. Labor becomes available during peak sowing and harvesting seasons. Reduces labor shortage in agriculture. So harvesting or peak sowing season of labor easily available ho, karon hetu time public work pause kori dia jabo up to 60 days. So it will reduce labor shortages in agriculture. Lower wage pressure. Less competition between farm work and public works. Helps control wage inflation during critical seasons. So ekini public work ko farm work ko jodi ekelogot thake teতিয়াale besike dibo laga hole wage to farmers e make workers, but it will help control wage inflation karon public works bondor hoibo peak sowing and harvesting season. Improved water and irrigation, focus on water conservation jikhini ami salu. Okay, and better connectivity and storage, construction of rural roads, storage facilities, post harvest losses reduction hobo, then easier access to markets hobo. Now rural workers are karone ki gaisu ekini sao, more guaranteed work, employment increase from 100 to 125 etu to hoy 25% rise in guaranteed work days. Okay, faster and safer payments hobo because of digital waste payments, other based verification, reduced delays and less chance of waste theft or corruption. Unemployment allowance diya jabo, if work is not provided, workers must receive mandatory unemployment allowance. Okay, and this will strengthen their job security. Now creation of durable assets is also in the pipeline of roads, water systems, community infrastructure and long-term village development. And predictable job planning, work planning led by gram panchayats, more organized and predictable employment availability. মই এটা ডাটা দিছিলোঁ আপোনালোকক যে আনএমপ্লয়মেণ্ট চিটুৱেশ্যন কি আছে এজ পাৰ 2025. Rural unemployment কিমান পাৰ্চেণ্টেজ আছে 3.9% stagnant, but urban unemployment কিমান আছে 6.7%. It is rising. Okay, 6.7%. So more people are thought to come from the urban areas to the reverse migration of work, urban to rural. So we should get prepared for it. Now, what are the major criticisms of the BBG Ramji Act? Beto ekta bahut criticism hoise, opposition e bahut koise aru many experts have also said about it. Okay, so ki criticism ami ekhini bostu directly exam ot likhibo pao, ami mention koribo pao. Let's see them. Okay, in detail in depth. Number 1, dilution of the legal right to work. So what is BBG Ramji Act directly dilutes the legal right to work. Earlier MGNREGA ki asile, MGNREGA was demand driven. If a worker demanded work, the government had to provide it. No strict funding cap. Okay, if a worker demanded work, the government had to provide it. No strict funding cap. Now BBG Ramji Act, central funding is capped through state-wise normative allocation. যোনটো আমি অলপ আগতে discuss কৰিলো. So once a state's allocation is exhausted, no further central funds would be released. Once a state's allocation is exhausted, no further central funds would be released. Next, it should be the spent amount should be expenditure should be bared by the state governments, by respective states. The workers' guaranteed employment effectively stops. So it is a major criticism. Reduce central responsibility. Earlier, center paid 100% of unskilled wages. Now, most states must bear 40% of wage costs, like 60% 40 model to Asilami center state funding rule to Saishil. Only special category states like Northeastern and Himalayan and UT with legislature, you have to keep about states get 90:10. If spending exceeds allocation, states pay full extra cost. So reduce central responsibility. Criticism is heavier fiscal burden on states. Poorer states may restrict work to control costs, and there is a risk of uneven implementation across India. Number 3, 60-day pause shrinks real work window. Scheme can pause for up to 60 days during peak agricultural seasons. Workers must complete 125 days within a shorter active period. Criticism reduces the effective availability of guaranteed work. Makes it harder to actually realize 125 days of work. May hurt landless laborers who depend fully on wage work. So, because they are fully dependent on wage work. So, 60-day pause shrinks the real work window because scheme can be paused for up to 60 days during peak agricultural season, and it will reduce the effective availability of guaranteed work. Now, budget cap overrides entitlement. This normative allocation into Asile, it fixes yearly central funding, and there is no open-ended funding like before. So once funds are exhausted, work will stop, obviously, right? So it becomes budget restricted and centrally rationed scheme type ho jay. This BBG Ramji Act. Now, technological exclusion risk. এটা আমি যেহেতু জানো যে এটো unskilled workforce কারণে হয় না, rural unskilled workforce কারণে। So এমন তো obviously technologically sound হয় না, because there is a huge digital divide হয় না. So this act, what does it do? The act mandates GIS based dashboards, PM Gati Shakti layers, central digital stakes, biometrics, geotagging, AI audits, all linked to a Viksit Bharat National Rural Infrastructure stake. So here criticism to ki hole technology karone bahut manu ki hobo exclude ho paye. So technology becomes compulsory, not optional. So a biometric failure or tech breach can block access. No clear appeal mechanism in case of digital exclusion. So that might exclude more an unskilled rural worker, and I get excluded, and I have no idea of how to appeal. So, and there is no clear appeal mechanism also. So what will I do? I will be reduced to death by no work and no food, right? So very severe thing. Poor, elderly or digitally illiterate workers may suffer. Weakening of decentralized planning. Earlier, Manrega ki hoychile gram panchayats and gram sabhas planned work based on local needs and community strengths. Now ki hobo local plans filtered through central digital systems. So one top down decision hol jana bostu. Planning influenced by national despots and statistics. So criticism reduces grassroots autonomy, centralizes decision making, may ignore local priorities and skills. Number 7, risk of wage protection weakening. Opposition concerns ki hoy je state sharing wage burden may delay payments, budget pressure may restrict work demand, and there is a fear of gradual dilution of workers' protections. By allocation versus need mismatch. Rupees 95,000 crore allocated in this budget. Okay, but if allocations are fixed, 95,000 crore allocate to budget. But if allocations are fixed on allocation too. So high demand states, high demand states may run out of funds early. Criticism: employment depends on financial ceiling, not actual rural distress. Okay. So employment to এটা depend হ'ব কিহত financial ceiling হতে depend হ'ব যোনটো rural distress হৈ আছে হেতু মতে employment এটা state বিলাকে provide কৰিব নোৱাৰিব হেতু কোৱা হৈছে 9th urban employment and migration concern এটা আমি যেহেতু দেখিছো যে urban employment is rising 6.7%. Rural workers may need mobility. They also may need mobility কারণ 60 days to work নহব. So no strong focus on easing interstate worker movement. Already urban unemployment কিমান হৈ আছে 6.7%. মানে urban area to jobs or কি হৈ আছে shortage হৈ আছে. But at the same time rural workers যদি migrate কৰিব খোজে, then there is no effective mechanism. Okay, no focus on easing interstate worker movement. At a time of rising unemployment, restrictions and caps may worsen distress. So 60 days to কাম কৰিব নোৱাৰে. So এইখিনি 60 days কেনেকৈ খাব কৰিব তাই? So এইটো migrate কৰিব লাগিব urban area le. And urban area already problem হৈ আছে. Unemployment is rising 6.7% by 2025 data. So just ভাবকচোন কিমান বেয়া হ'ব এইটো. Okay. Now, prelims practice question. Question. With reference to the proposed BBG Ramji Act 2025, consider the following statements. The shift from demand-driven funding to normative allocation marks a transition from a rights-based entitlement model to a budget-capped welfare framework. Under the BBG Ramji framework, once a state exhausts its normative allocation, the central government remains largely legally bound to provide additional funds to honor the employment guarantee. The 60-day statutory pause during peak agricultural seasons may reduce the effective operational window for realizing the 125-day employment guarantee. Under MGNREGA, the central government bore 100% of the unskilled wage cost. Which of the given statements above are correct? Suppose the shift from demand-driven to be correct, obviously. The normative allocation marks a transition from a rights-based entitlement model to a budget-capped allocation and 495,000 crore budget-capped welfare framework. So this is a correct statement. Number 2, under the BBG Ramji framework, once a state exhausts its normative allocation, the central government remains legally bound to state government, hai na? Central government to responsibility hoy na, jodi money exhaust hoy jay. So it is a wrong statement. So 2 jodi eliminate kori diyo, so এই তিনটা statement to eliminate hoye golo তিনটা option to. So thakil ki 1 3 and 4 thakil 1 3 and 4. So what's the correct answer? Correct answer is A 1 3 and 4. It is statement. Number 2 is wrong because central government remains legally bound and this state government come over it. Okay. Now explanation here diya goisile je earlier under Mahatma Gandhi funding was demand driven, focus demanded work, center to provide funds. It functions as a rights-based entitlement. Under BBG Ramji, state-wise normative allocation fixes central funding limits. Once funds are exhausted, work may stop. This converts it into a budget-capped model. From legal right triggered by demand to entitlement, limited by fiscal ceiling. So statement 1 is correct. Statement 2 is incorrect because BBG Ramji introduces fixed normative allocation for each state. Okay, expenditure beyond allocation must be borne by the state. The center is not automatically obligated to release extra funds. Hence, once allocation is exhausted. Okay, so statement 2 is incorrect. Now, statement 3 is correct because it allows up to 60-day pause during peak agricultural seasons. This reduces the effective working period within a financial year. Even though 125 days are guaranteed, the actual available operational window shrinks. Hence, statement 3 is correct. Statement 4 correct. Under MGNREGA, center bore 100% of unskilled wage costs. States paid unemployment allowance, 25% material cost, administrative expenses. But under the BBG Ramji, it has shifted to 60-40 model, 90-10 model to specific category states. Okay, so statement 4 is correct. Main practice question এটা দিছিলো মই আপোনালোকে টেলিগ্ৰাম চেনেলৰ লিংক যোনটো দি আছে ডেসক্ৰিপচনত তাতে সাবমিট কৰিব পাৰিব ইয়াৰ আনসাৰটো ওকে আপোনালোকে সাবমিট কৰা না হেকাৰণে মই এতিয়ালৈকে মডেল আনসাৰ দিয়া নাই একচুয়ালি ওকে সো যেতিয়াৰ পৰা আপোনালোকে লিখা ষ্টাৰ্ট কৰিব মই এইকেইটা মডেল আনসাৰ আপোনালোকক প্ৰভাইড কৰি দি যাম to discuss whether the proposed BBG Ramji Act strengthens rural employment governance or dilutes the rights-based character of MGNREGA. Substantiate your answer with legal and constitutional arguments. Okay. এতিয়া second editorial আহি গৈছো মানে first editorial actually there was just an article newspaper article okay so this UGC equity push fair so etu actually বহুত debated asile protest hoisile supreme court interfere korise so GS paper 2 important from GS paper 1 social issues and GS paper 4 ethics okay so is UGC equity push fair কি asile etu আমি detailed in depth ya pisat sam ami but let's first read the article বহুত ধুনিয়া article বহুত ধুনিয়া আর্টিকেল বহুতখিনি ওয়ার্ডস আছে বহুতখিনি টার্মস আছে বহুত ডাইমেনশন টাচ কৰিছে so let's read it once but Rajdeep Chaudhary the UGC's new equity regulations 2026 arrive with an admirable headline zero tolerance for caste and identity based exclusion on campus the purpose is indisputably salutary but good ends do not excuse bad design two features of the regulations an insistently compressed enforcement timetable and a structurally category-specific protection model backed by draconian sanctions invite sober legal and administrative critique. Put plainly, the risk is not only that institutions will be pushed to act quickly, but that they will be pushed to act without hearing. Not only that certain historically marginalized groups will be specially protected, but that everyone else may be left in a legal limbo. Both outcomes threaten the very justice the regulations profess to deliver. Administrative whiplash is shorthand for what happens when urgency displaces deliberation. So administrative whiplash, এটা বহুত ধুনীয়া keyword হয়. Okay, I mean some এটো কি হয়. The regulations require মানে urgency কারণে কি হয় justice deny হয়ে যায়. Okay, so to avoid punishment, administration বা the institutions will try to expedite the procedure. ঠিক আছে? Procedure of punishment in order to avoid punishment for themselves. Okay, so it will create so it will check out কি হ'ব যে justice deny হয়. Okay, it's certain for what happens when urgency displaces deliberation. The regulations require equity committees to meet within 24 hours of a complaint and run 24/7 helplines. If institutions fail to comply quickly, they can face penalties such as loss of UGC funding or even being barred from offering degree programs. Under such a regime, the administrative instinct will tilt towards rapid, risk-averse closure rather than careful inquiry. When a regulator can withhold funds or academic recognition for the appearance of non-compliance, the institutional objective shifts from ascertaining truth to avoiding sanction. The result is panic governance. Decisions taken to check a compliance box, not because a thorough fact-finding process has satisfied the tests of evidence and fairness. This is not just an efficiency concern. It is a direct collision with the bedrock rule of natural justice, odi alteram partem. এইটো কি হয় এইটো আমি চাম natural justice. What does natural justice mean? What does odi alteram partem mean? The requirement that no person be condemned unheard. Indian Constitution okay, it requires a requirement that no person be condemned unheard. Indian constitutional jurisprudence has long read the principles of natural justice into the fabric of Article 14 and 21. Administrative decisions that strip rights or reputations without a fair hearing invite constitutional scrutiny. The Supreme Court in Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India, 1978, made it clear that a hearing and a reasonable procedure are not optional adornments to administrative action. They are part of the rule of law itself. A 24-hour window to investigate complex interpersonal allegations, often requiring corroboration, contextual inquiry, and sensitive witness engagement, risks turning what should be a fair hearing into a rubber stamp. In short, justice hurried is justice buried. These are not merely theoretical anxieties. They have already encountered a significant judicial roadblock. In January 2026, the Supreme Court issued an interim stay on the implementation of these regulations. The bench observed that the rules appeared prima facie vague and expressed concern over their potentially exclusionary nature. By freezing the 2026 mandate, the court has effectively enforced a return to the 2012 guidelines, creating a necessary pause to ensure that the pursuit of equity does not bypass the rigors of constitutional law. There is also a structural problem in how the regulations define the protected class. The 2012 advisory language was behavior and harm centric. The 2026 mane agoteo advisory asile regulations asile, okay, but the 2012 regulations were advisory language was behavior and harm centric, while the 2026 text, however, foregrounds SC, ST, OBC categories in a way critics say narrows the definition of actionable discrimination. The legal consequence of this drafting choice is profound. Rights-based regulation is ordinarily built on conduct, harassment, exclusion, and hostile environment, not on a hierarchy of groups. By anchoring protection to particular categories, the regulations risk creating a legal blind spot where identical conduct against a student outside those named categories lacks the same remedial pathway. This is not merely a doctrinal quibble. It affects campus harmony. If equality law protects certain groups through bespoke mechanisms, while others must rely on generalized civility norms, the campus becomes a patchwork of protections rather than a coherent community of rights. A further constitutional and institutional worry is the calibration of the UGC's role. Traditionally, the UGC has been an academic standards and funding body. The 2026 regulations reconfigure it implicitly, if not explicitly, into a social auditor with powers to withdraw financial lifelines and academic permissions based on equity compliance. This autonomy trade-off is not neutral. When degree granting capacity and research funds become levers to secure a social outcome, universities lose a degree of institutional autonomy that is central to academic freedom and governance. Centralized oversight may be necessary to protect rights, but without clear procedural safeguards, it can turn into a heavy-handed tool of central control. This transformation, the centralization of academic power through the weaponization of social compliance metrics, demands careful democratic and judicial scrutiny. Finally, the regulations remedy design assumes a technological and administrative capacity that many institutions simply do not possess. The requirement for 24/7 portals, equity squads, and large committees assumes that all campuses have strong staff, money, and technology like big city institutions. Small town colleges, poorly funded state institutions, and new private colleges may struggle to meet these rules and feel overwhelmed by the heavy paperwork and procedures involved. A law that looks robust on paper and rhetorically attractive in New Delhi may become a paper tiger in practice, creating formal mechanisms without the staff, training, or technological infrastructure to implement them effectively. The result will be uneven justice and, paradoxically, greater campus inequality. There are practical steps that would preserve the regulation's remedial spirit while guarding against constitutional infirmities. First, timelines should be proportionate and tired. Immediate interim relief, such as safety and preservation of evidence, can coexist with a realistic investigative period that respects the right to be heard. Okay. Second, the definition of actionable discrimination should be behavior centered, with specific mention that protections for historically marginalized groups do not exclude recourse for others. Third, sanctions tied to funding and degree granting should be last resort measures, triggered only after procedural guarantees, including independent appellate review, have been exhausted. Finally, implementation must come with capacity support, dedicated central funds, training for equity committees, and technological grants for smaller institutions. The UGC's goal of making campuses safe and inclusive is both necessary and laudable. But the law must not substitute legitimation by speed for legitimacy through fairness. The phrase that should guide any regulatory reform is not merely equity now, but equity done rightly. If very nice quote type, right? Not merely equity now, but equity done rightly. If inclusion and the rule of law are both valued, the regulations must be retooled so that they do not create the very injustice they seek to prevent. Now, UGC যোনটো ইকুইটি ল ইকুইটি ৰুল আছিলে কি হয় ৰেগুলেশ্যনটো কি হয় একচুৱেলি লেটছ চি বেকগ্ৰাউণ্ড এণ্ড দ্য কনটেক্সট দ্য নিড ফৰ নিউ ৰেগুলেশ্যনছ এতিয়া 2007 the Thorat Committee report first formally documented the pervasive discrimination, social segregation, and isolation based by a report দিছিলে right isolation faced by SC/ST students within elite educational institutions. Over a decade later, a 2019 survey by IIT Delhi corroborated this reality, revealing that 75% of SC/ST OBC students reported facing discrimination, underscoring the systemic and persistent nature of the problem. Okay. Now, triggering events kita ki asile? So 2012 to ami jehetu janu je eta regulation aisile, but that was inadequate to prevent discrimination. Okay. So immediate triggering etu 2025 jonto ahile etu ki asile? The triggering events that exposed system failures 2016 কি হৈছিলে Rohit Vemula's death by suicide at University of Hyderabad due to caste-based discrimination, and 2019 Payal Tadvi's death by suicide at a Mumbai Medical College. This also because of discrimination. So legal and advocacy push in 2019 filed a PIL public interest litigation in the Supreme Court. They argued that the 2012 UGC regulations were inadequate to prevent discrimination. They demanded steps to address caste-based discrimination and enforce students' fundamental rights. Judicial directive in 2025 Supreme Court heard of PIL, the court explicitly called for the creation of a robust mechanism to tackle caste-based discrimination in higher education. Regulatory response UGC কি আনিলে judicial mandate এটো দিছিলে Supreme Court তাৰ বিনিময়ত তাক support কৰিবলৈ বা substantiate কৰিবলৈ UGC released a draft of the new regulations in 2025. The finalized UGC promotion of equity in higher education institutions regulation 2026 were officially notified in January 26. তাৰ পিছৰ পৰা protest and movements আৰম্ভ হৈ গৈছে. Now, editorial to basically কব কি কৈছে কি actually আমি এটো চাইলো প্ৰথমত যে ক্ৰিটিসাইজ কৰিছে ৰাইট গোল ভাৰ্সেস ডিজাইন মিসম্যাচ গোলটো ঠিকে আছিল যে ডিসক্রিমিনেশন ইরাডিকেট কৰিব বাট ডিজাইনটো অকন মিলা নাই মানে ওকে সো the goal zero tolerance for caste or identity based discrimination very admirable purpose right Supreme Court কৈছিলে so UGC law আনিছিলে বা rules আনিছিলে but the problem is that in the rules regulatory design has fundamental flaws that may defeat its own purpose এটা কি আছিল flaws এটা আমি চাম এটো good intentions don't automatically lead to good implementation. Yes. Now, two major structural flaws identified in the article. Rush timelines. কি কৈছিলে যে administrative whiplash. What it means? When speed becomes more important than proper process. Proper process follow নহব কারণ কি কৈছিলে যে specific problems কৈছিলে যে 24-hour committee meeting rule. Equity committee must meet within 24 hours of complaint আহিলে within 24 hours equity committee meeting এটা কৰিব লাগিব না 24/7 হেল্পলাইন ৰিকোয়ারমেন্ট লাগিব ৰাউন্ড দা ক্লক অপাৰেশনাল প্ৰেছাৰ এটা এইগিলা কাৰণে ষ্টাফ ক'ৰ পৰা আনিব হয় না ট্ৰেইনিং কেনেকৈ দিব একো কৰাই নাই আৰু consequences risk averse decisions institutions prioritize avoiding penalties over truth seeking এটো কাৰণে এইবিলাকৰ কাৰণে administrative whiplash হ'ব যে ইনষ্টিটিউচনে কি কৰিব যে পেনাল্টি নহলে ইনষ্টিটিউচনৰ ওপৰত পেনাল্টি লাগিব না বহুত সিৰিয়াছ পেনাল্টি হয় তেহঁতৰ ওপৰত যোনটো এডমিনিষ্ট্ৰেটিভ একাডেমিক টেক্স আছে সেইকেইটাও উইথড্ৰ কৰি ল'ব ফাণ্ডিং ৰখাই দিব ইউজিচিয়ে চ' এইখিনিৰ কাৰণে কি হ'ব ফাইনেলি জাজমেণ্টত আহিব চেষ্টা কৰিব ন এভৰি ইনষ্টিটিউচন ফৰ এভৰি কেছ চ' ইন ডেট কেছ জাষ্টিচ ডিনাই হ'ব পাৰে আনফেয়াৰ হ'ব পাৰে unfair hobo pare ki hobo obviously, because so institutions prioritize avoiding penalties over truth seeking. Panic governance hobo, checking compliance boxes rather than proper investigation. Insufficient time for complex cases needing witness interviews and evidence gathering. Legal danger violates odi alteram partem. So যোনটো other side হয়, যোনটো actually কি বুলি কয় culprit বুলি কোৱা হয় না, before convict actually. So convict would not be heard properly. The fundamental principle of natural justice enshrined in Constitution, Article 14 and Article 21. Now, another second structural flaw ki ase B, category specific protection. Category specific protection diya ase. So it blind spot ho gol na. So only those will be discriminated. That's not the thing, right? Others may also be discriminated. ঠিক আছে, what changed from 2012 to 2026? 2012 আসলে behavior centric approach focused on harmful conduct regardless of victim. 2026 category centric approach specifically names SC, ST, OBC, PWD. Consequences creates hierarchy of protection. Some groups get special mechanisms while others do not. Identical discriminatory behavior against some outside these categories gets less protection. So it group of যদি বেলেগে কোনোবা discriminate হয় তেতিয়া এইটা less protection পাব না compared to them. Creates patchwork campus rather than unified community of rights. So it কি হ'ব লাগিছিল actually into neutral হ'ব লাগিছিল, not caste based. It should be neutral for all. এতিয়া আৰু তিনিটা এডিশনাল কনসার্ন ইয়াতে আৰ্টিকেলত কৈছিলে ৰাইটাৰজনে যে UGC's changed role, autonomy thereof, the traditional role of UGC is academic standards and funding body. There under regulations নতুন role define কৰি দিছে UGC যে social auditor with power to withhold funds, bar degree granting authority and derecognize institution বিলাকক degree recognize কৰিব পাৰে UGC. Okay, so it weaponization হ'ল ন, weaponizing funding compliance metrics undermines institutional autonomy. So proper investigation কৰিবলৈ time নাপাব institution বিলাকে, right? Another concern, implementation capacity gap. Now all institutions have equal resources বুলি assume কৰি লৈছে এইটো rule law কে. So small colleges versus big city institutions have vastly different capacities. Specific challenges like 24/7 portals require technology infrastructure. Equity squads require dedicated staff. Equity squad বনোৱা কথা কৈছে. So heavy paperwork burdens under resourced institutions. Paperwork go to so under resourced institutions so যিকেইটা আছে under resourced already ইহঁতৰ লগত they are resource crunch. They will face heavy paperwork and it will provide extra burden on them. Now result to কি হ'ব যে অকল পেন এণ্ড পেপাৰতে লটো সাংঘাতিক হ'ব, but in effective implementation this law will fail. So paper tiger regulations that create formal mechanisms without actual implementation capacity. আৰু এটা কি কৰি দিছে one size fits all approach. Now uniform requirements for diverse institutions. বেলেগ বেলেগ institution বেলেগ হ'ব লাগে, কোনোবা institution ইমানে আইডিয়া হয় এটা ডিসক্রিমিনেশনে প্ৰেক্টিছ নহয় বোলে, তাৰে কোড এথিক্স very ethical institution বোলে, তাৰ কাৰণে অলপমান বেলেগ হ'ব লাগে, বেলেগ ৰিলেক্স নৰ্ম হ'ব লাগে, right? No gradation based on institution size or resources. Or different resource capacity চাই কিনে institution বিলাকক implementation time দিব লাগে বা তেওঁলোকক extra funding দিব লাগে যে আপোনালোকে এইখিনি infrastructure বনাওক, সেইখিনি ষ্টাফক আপুনি ট্ৰেইন কৰক, এইটো কমিটি বনাওক, অমুক কমিটি বনাওক, এইটো কমিটি বনাওক, স্কোৱাড বনাওক, ইকুইটি স্কোৱাড বনাওক। চ' এইখিনিৰ কাৰণে এক্সট্ৰা ফাণ্ডিং দিব লাগে, এক্সট্ৰা মেন পাৱাৰ চ'ৰ্চ কৰিব লাগে, এমপ্লয় কৰিব লাগিব, ৰাইট? চ' এইটো কৰা নাই। চ' ৰিস্ক অফ আনইভেন জাষ্টিছ, ৱেল ৰিচোৰ্চড ইনষ্টিটিউশ্যনছ ইমপ্লিমেণ্ট বেটাৰ দেন প'ৰ ওৱানছ, অবভিয়াছলি। এতিয়া কিছুমান ইয়াতে টাৰ্মছ আছিলে, সেইখিনি টাৰ্মছ মই ইয়াতে বুজাব চেষ্টা কৰিছোঁ, যদি বুজি পায়। যদি বুজি নাপায় কমেণ্ট ছেকশ্যনত কমেণ্ট কৰিব, আই উইল কাম উইথ এ ডিটেইল ভিডিঅ' অন ইচ এণ্ড এভৰিথিং। অ'কে, অডি অল্টেৰাম পাৰ্টেম, এইটো বুজাই গৈছে। হেয়াৰ দ্য আদাৰ চাইড, no one should be condemned without being heard. Parts of Article 14, equality and right to equality, and Article 21, right to life and personal liberty. Now, natural justice কথা কৈ আছে। Natural justice মানে it represents fundamental common law procedure, common law মানে British procedural and fairness principles designed to prevent the miscarriage of justice in legal and administrative decision making. Now, key pillars কি হয় natural justice? Derived from nature, right? Natural justice. Key pillars include nemo judex in causa sua, means unbiased decision maker. Odi alteram partem, এইটো হয় right to a fair hearing, and আৰু এটা কি হয় যে the right to know the case or evidence against you. So it in the pillars হয়, key pillars are natural justice. Okay, so these things are sine qua non to a democracy, right? তাৰপিছত meaning of paper tiger জানে, stronger on paper but weak in real world implementation. Prima facie, where the word asile, right? At first sight or on the face of it, enough evidence to proceed but not conclusive proof. Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India, if detailed video needed on what this article changed, মই ইয়াতে কৈ দিছোঁ যে এইটোৱে procedure established by law পৰা আমি due process of law moved হৈছিলোঁ to this article 1978. So Maneka Gandhi versus Union of, যদি in detail জানিব ইচ্ছা আছে, just comment in this video, I'll do it. I'll make a separate video on it. So Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India is the landmark judgment of the Supreme Court of India that transformed the interpretation of the fundamental right to life and personal liberty under Article 21 of the Constitution, decided on January 25, 1978, which broadened constitutional protections, মানে Article 21 or scope to broad koi dile, okay, against arbitrary state action and established a framework linking Articles 14, 19, and 21. Right? মানে একচুয়ালি ক'ব গ'লে আগতে আৰ্টিকল 19 টু ৰাইটছ অফ everyone আছিলে আৰ্টিকল 19 ৰাইট টু ফ্ৰীডম of speech and expression. That was a right for everyone, and article 21 was the right only for the people. Actually, and article 21 was not available to the person who is under the bars, behind the bars. ঠিক আছে, right of a registered person নাছিলে article 21. তাৰপিছত কি কৰিলে এইটো কেছে যে article 21 is also available to everyone, মানে broad কৰি দিলে. It should be not restricted to 3 people only. It should be available to everyone. So it made it more broad, right? So we move from procedure to be, মানে যিকোনো লৰ আমি অকল প্ৰচেছটো চালে নহ'ব, ল বনোৱা প্ৰচেছটো ঠিক হৈছে নে নাই বা ল ইমপ্লিমেণ্টেশ্যনৰ প্ৰচেছটো ঠিক হৈছে নে নাই, অকল সেইটো চালে নহ'ব। মানে লটো কেনেকুৱা, লটোৱে কৈ কি আছে, অ'কে, সেইটো ৰিজনেবিলিটিও চেক কৰিব লাগিব, ৰাইট? তো এইটো চেক কৰিলে না ইয়াত এইটো ল, অ'কে, লটোৱে কৈ কি আছে একচুৱেলি। চ' দ্যাটছ দ্য থিং, ডিউ প্ৰচেছ। So let's move forward. Suggested solutions from critic. Critic কি কৈছে solutions আমাৰ article editorial, right? Editorial কি কৈছে, timeline reforms, tiered approach, immediate interim relief, safety measures plus realistic investigation period এটা set কৰিব লাগে rules. Balanced schedule, speed for urgent protection but adequate time for fair hearing. Number B, definition refinement, behavior centric protection, focus on discriminatory conduct regardless of victims category. एक कास्ट कैटेगरी स्वाद से डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी कंडक्ट तो की होइছে हेतु फोकस होबे, राइट? इंक्लूसिव लैंग्वेज, स्पेसिफिक प्रोटेक्शन फॉर हिस्टोरिकली मार्जिनलाइज्ड ग्रुप्स विदाउट एक्सक्लूडिंग अदर्स, राइट? इट शुड बी न्यूट्रल. सैंक्शंस रिफॉर्म, लास्ट रिजोर्ट मेजर्स, फंडिंग और डिग्री पेनाल्टीज ओनली आफ्टर ऑल प्रोसीड्यूरल सेफगार्ड्स एग्जॉस्टेड. सो लास्ट रिजोर्ट হ'ব লাগিব এইবিলাক, কাৰণ মেইন পাৰপাস কি হয়, এডুকেশ্যনৰ হয় ন। সো আপুনি যদি ফান্ডিং আৰু ডিগ্ৰী ৰখাই দিব তেন্তে হাৰ্ম কাৰ হ'ব, ষ্টুডেণ্টছৰে হ'ব, ৰাইট? ফিউচাৰ অফ দিছ নেশ্যন. গ্ৰেজুৱেটেড ৰেছপন্স, progressive disciplinary approach rather than immediate nuclear options, right? Capacity building hobo lage, central support, dedicated funds for training and technology, differential requirements scaled to institutional size or capacity, implementation support hobo lage, technical grants for smaller institutions provided by the center or by the UGC. Okay, এতে এই আৰ্টিকলৰ পৰা আমি কি বুজিলো, কোৰ টেনশন হৈছে inclusion versus rule of law. Rule of law মানে constitutionalism or that everyone is under the law, even the government is restricted by law or by the rights of the people. That's the concept of the philosophy of rule of law. Urgency versus due process, central control versus institutional autonomy. The article argues that equity is essential, but fairness in procedure is equally essential. Okay, so that's the thing, due process is being checked, right? And fairness in the law, means the law should be fair, just, it is equally essential. Speed cannot replace justice. Inclusion must not compromise constitutional safeguards. This is a clear-cut case of clear-cut arena of due process of law. Okay. Supreme Court এইটোৱে কৈছিলে. Now, key strengths and improvements in the 2026 regulations compared to 2012. So 2012 comparison কি changes আনিছিলে এইটো লয়, এইটো চাই লওঁ. Binding power and strong compliance mechanism. Unlike the advisory 2012 regulations, the new rules are mandatory and enforceable. The UGC is also empowered to take additional punitive actions, giving the regulations real teeth. Broader definition and wider scope, expanded beyond narrow terms to include both explicit and implicit দুটা এক কভার কৰিব. Okay, structural biasness and any act harming human dignity. Okay, now explicitly the now protected categories explicitly includes OBCs alongside SC, STs and under caste based discrimination. So OBC, SC, ST এইখিনি গোটেইকেইটা ইনক্লুড কৰি গৈছে. So এইটো 2026 coverage extended from only students to also include faculty included as a non-teaching staff and management members also. Broaden the coverage. So basic framework, all colleges and universities replaces 2012 rules completely. Okay. আৰু কি setup বনাব দিছে যে there should be a equal opportunity center. EOC হ'ব লাগিব, main office to handle discrimination cases, this equal opportunity center. So এইখিনি the specific provision হয়, ঠিক আছে, UGC regulations, equity regulations. It should have a coordinator, equal opportunity center এটা কি দিব লাগিব, coordinator থাকিব লাগিব, যোনজন হ'ব কি senior professor, and equity committee inside the EOC ভিতৰত এটা কি থাকিব লাগিব, equity committee থাকিব লাগিব, and head would be institution head, just like VC for universities and principal for colleges. Member 3 professors plus 1 non-teaching staff plus 2 external experts. Student or representation and must include SC, ST, OBC, women and disabled representatives. Students 2 as special invitees. Okay, special invitee. Equity helpline 24/7 phone line থাকিব লাগিব, confidential if requested. নতুন কেছ হ'ব, যিকোনো কেছ হ'ব, এইটো if request ahead, then it should remain confidential or secretive. And D, equity squads বনাব লাগিব, like moral policing কাৰণে, patrol groups on campus, prevent discrimination. This is somewhat like utopia, মানে কি কৰিব কি হৈছে actually, মানে moral policing or something. So equity ambassadors, 1 person in each department or hostel. First point for complaints, equity ambassadors to থাকিব. Okay, so that's something different government is trying to do. Complaint process timeline, এখানে লেখা আছে, চাই ল'ব, committee meets within 24 hours of the complaint, investigation done, then report in 15 working days, action taken within 7 working days, police involved if crime suspected immediately, so appeal possible to ombudsman in 30 days. Everyone must do this. Sign plays I won't discriminate students and staff. Annual meeting at above, head meets students, parents, police, video uploaded online. Okay. And fair allocation, hostels or classes assigned fairly, counseling available, professional counselors to be provided to be ensured by the institutions, posters displayed, anti-discrimination messages on an campus, just like anti-ragging messages, right? Okay, everyone must do this. Okay, reporting requirements every 6 months. EOC publishes report on website, includes complaints received, actions taken, dropout rates. Every year reports sent to UGC and government. So এইখিনি institution কৰিব লাগিব। এতিয়া most important, institution punishment face কৰিব লগা হয়, ঠিক আছে? So if they do not follow the rules, institutions can face one or more of any of the following if they do not follow. No UGC fund দিয়া নাযাব, cannot offer degrees, very serious, cannot run online courses, remove from approved list or de-recognized হৈ যাব UGC norms of additional penalties as decided. So this thing would turn into administrative whiplash. এই lawটো কিন্তু অকমান চাব গ'লে constitutionally aligned আছে দেই। Right to equality regulations combat implicit and structural biases to ensure substantive equality, not just formal equality. So law to rules or regulations of both angles আমি চাব লাগিব, analyze কৰিব লাগিব। সেইকাৰণে মই both angles cover কৰিবলৈ চাইছোঁ ইয়াত। যে fundamental rights লগত connection আছে, যে right to equality promote কৰে, obviously discrimination end কৰা মানে কি? Right to equality promote কৰা, Article 15 prohibition of discrimination regulations specifically target discrimination on exactly the same grounds: religion, race, sex, caste, place of birth, RRCSP, and plus disability. So Article 15 লগত constitutionally aligned হয় বস্তুটো। Okay. And Article 21, right to life with dignity, live with dignity. Regulations recognize harm to human dignity as discrimination. So law is trying to focus more on substantive equality, not formal equality. Formal equality to clear, treating everyone exactly the same. Or substantive equality to clear, recognizing historical injustices, যেনেকে SC, ST, OBC, okay, that's different backgrounds to ensure real fairness. So এইটো এটা angle হয়। Okay. Regulations adopt substantive equality approach. Regulation. Now judiciary সোমাই গ'ল, Supreme Court সোমাই গ'ল, okay? Supreme Court January 2026 intervention, 29 January Supreme Court সোমালে। Then what did Supreme Court say? Let's see. Observe কি কৰিলে Supreme Court, কি ক'লে এইটো rules or regulations against it. The provisions suffered from ambiguity. Ambiguous আছে, provisions বিলাক clear নহয়, and have possibility of misuse কৰিব পৰা যাব। যে কোনোবাই NF force prevalent complaint এটা ফাইল কৰি দিলে, তো student এটা লাইফ বৰবাদ হৈ গ'ল, right? So order regulations kept in abeyance or suspended. So order কৰি দিছে যে এতিয়া কাৰণে বস্তুকেইটা পজত ৰাখক till further orders. আপোনালোকে চেঞ্জেছ আনক কি আনক আমি কম, for the time being you keep them in abeyance or suspended. Pause কৰি ৰাখক। Legal power used under Article 142, complete justice. Courts extraordinary power for complete justice, ঠিক আছে? Result 2012 regulations will be continuing till further orders. Attention to কি আছিলে যে Supreme Court intervention highlights the need to balance speed of protection for victims with fairness of process for all parties. Both are constitutional requirements. Okay, speed of protection, fairness of process, both are requirements as per Article 21 of the Constitution. Now, while the regulations are paused, their structural designs warrant critical examination. The ongoing judicial review offers a key opportunity to refine the framework, ensuring it is constitutionally sound and operationally effective. Future efforts must remain focused on meaningful progress, not retreat. So this is the conclusion you can use in any answer if it comes based on this context. Okay, so let's move forward. এতিয়া আপোনালোকৰ কাৰণে চাগে এটা মেইন প্ৰেক্টিছ কুৱেশ্যন আছে। So based on this particular context, that particular article karne moi dhei koisilo particular regulation karne directly mention kora nai but indirectly in implicit ase. So eneke questions apnar mains reflect hobo pare de. In the quest to create a just and equitable society, does absolute legal protection for historically disadvantaged groups risk creating a hierarchy of victimhood, thereby inadvertently perpetuating identity-based divisions? এটা বহুত খিনি keywords আছে ইয়াত আপোনালোকে keywords এটা ভাঙি ভাঙি চাব আপোনালোকৰ এনসাৰটো অংকটো লাগিব মানে খুলিছে কি সেইটো গম পাব আগতে তাৰপিছত এনসাৰটো তেনেকৈ লজিকেলি এতিয়ালৈকে আমি যিখিনি ডিছকাছ কৰিলোঁ তাৰে বেচিছত আপোনালোকে ধুনীয়া এটা এনসাৰ দিব পাৰিব ৰাইট critically discuss with reference to the constitutional ideals of substantive equality, dignity, and fraternity. Then we say the procedural equality ki koi? Procedural equality focus only on the processes, not on the outcomes. The equality pabo karne ami ekini process, ekini procedure podo kori. Not on the outcomes. The outcome ki aibo ami swanai. But substantive equality, dignity, fraternity, itu ki outcome to ki hobo? Outcome to ahise nai. Jodi outcome to aha nai, tete itu okor process to follow kori lab nai na. No. So that's the thing. Substantive equality. Now, the last article hoy to editorial turning rooftops into power. GS paper 3, GS paper 2 governance and GS paper 5 Assam paper important hoy. Okay, let's read it. Very nice article. Both dunia eta concept dise Mr. Abhijit Saikia sir. Okay. Electricity expenditure is one of the least visible yet more persistent costs borne by any state administration. Under roads, bridges or public buildings, our bills rarely attract public debate. Yet they quietly consume a significant share of public funds year after year. From secretariats and district offices to hospitals, schools, police stations, water supply systems, and transport depots, electricity remains a constant operational expense that grows as services expand, systems become more digital, and tariffs rise. What is often accepted as an unavoidable cost of governance is in reality one of the most controllable pressures on public finances. Administrative buildings form the backbone of this expenditure. Government offices function for long hours with lighting, cooling computers, servers, and security systems running continuously. Air conditioning, in particular, has become a major contributor to electricity demand during long and humid summers. Individually, each office bill may appear modest, but multiplied across hundreds or thousands of buildings and repeated month after month, the cumulative burden becomes substantial. Healthcare facilities deepen this challenge. Hospitals, medical colleges, community health centers, and primary health units depend on uninterrupted electricity for diagnostics, laboratories, ventilation, cold storage for medicines, and digital health systems. Power supply in healthcare is non-negotiable. Every rupee spent on electricity is a rupee that could otherwise support medicines, equipment, or patient services. Education adds further pressure. Thousands of public schools and colleges rely on electricity for fans, lighting, water pumps, and increasingly smart classrooms, computer labs, and online learning. Water supply and sanitation systems are among the most energy-intensive services, with pumping stations and treatment plants operating daily and consuming large volumes of power, especially during the monsoon. The difficulty lies not only in the size of the electricity bill, but also in its structure. Costs are fragmented across departments and districts and paid through thousands of monthly accounts. Because the expense is distributed, it rarely receives the scrutiny given to large capital projects. At the same time, departments remain exposed to tariff increases and price volatility. Again, energy costs rise steadily while administrative budgets struggle to keep pace. Often, there is little incentive for departments to reduce consumption as savings disappear into consolidated budgets rather than benefiting the unit that made the effort. This is where lessons from the United Kingdom and Europe become relevant. Cities across these regions faced similar pressures, rising energy costs, expanding public services, and limited fiscal headroom. Instead of treating electricity bills as fixed and unavoidable, they began viewing public buildings as productive energy assets. Rooftops of schools, hospitals, offices, transport depots, and housing blocks were fitted with solar panels to generate electricity where it was consumed. The financial logic was cautious and practical. Every unit of electricity generated on-site was one unit not purchased from the grid. Because public buildings operate mainly during daylight hours, most solar power could be used immediately, maximizing savings. Over time, lower energy bills released funds that could be reinvested into public services and infrastructure. In several European cities, savings were deliberately channeled back into community facilities and further clean energy projects, creating a cycle in which early investments funded future ones. solar energy became a routine feature of public buildings, embedded into planning and refurbishment programs rather than treated as an exception. The situation in Assam mirrors many of these conditions, just like UK. Thousands of publicly owned buildings have large, underutilized rooftops. Offices, schools, and hospitals operate primarily during the daytime, aligning well with solar generation. State energy agencies already promote rooftop solar and subsidy frameworks exist, just like PM Surya Har Ghar Bijli Yojana, right? And households across urban and semi-urban areas have begun adopting rooftop systems, demonstrating that the technology performs reliably under local climatic conditions. Extending this approach systematically to government buildings is therefore a logical next step. Applying these lessons to administrative energy costs offers a clear pathway forward. Instead of viewing electricity bill as a permanent cost, the state can gradually replace purchase power with self-generated solar electricity. For administrative offices, hospitals, and educational institutions, this translates into lower monthly bills and reduced exposure to future tariff increases. These savings can then be channeled into improving facilities and services. The key lesson from the UK and Europe is institutional, not technological. Cities mapped public buildings, prioritized high demand rooftops, bundled solar projects to cut costs, and allowed departments to retain savings. Treating electricity as a strategic issue and letting offices reinvest efficiency gains can shift administrative culture, strengthen accountability, and drive sustained energy management reforms. Okay. Now let's see that what does the editorial say. এতিয়ালৈকে ক্লিয়াৰ হৈ গৈছে চাগে কি কৈছে এডিটৰিয়েল ইমান ধুনীয়া কথা এটা কৈছে ৰাইট ইলেক্ট্ৰিচিটি জেনেৰেশ্যনৰ কথা কৈছে অফিচ বিল্ডিঙৰ ৰুফটপ সোলাৰ বাই সোলাৰ পাৱাৰ জেনেৰেশ্যন ৰাইট চ' ডেট আমাৰ কি হয় ষ্টেট এক্সচেকাৰৰ ওপৰত লোডটো কম পৰক ইলেক্ট্ৰিচিটি কনজাম্পশ্যন ইলেক্ট্ৰিচিটি বিল পে' কৰাৰ কাৰণে ডিফাৰেণ্ট গভৰ্ণমেণ্ট বিল্ডিংছ গভৰ্ণমেণ্ট ইনষ্টিটিউশ্যনছৰ কাৰণে ৰাইট চ' লেটছ চি ইন ডিটেইল Electricity bills of government departments are large, continuous, and growing day by day, but largely ignored in public debate. Okay. The editorial argues that electricity expenditure is not unavoidable. It is a controllable fiscal burden. Not unavoidable, but it is a controllable fiscal burden. Why electricity cost is a serious issue? Hidden but heavy expense. So, dekha na jai actually, right? Government offices, hospitals, schools, police stations, water supply systems, transport depots, all depend on heavily on electricity. Even if each bill looks small, thousands of buildings are not tenekwa. Or count on monthly payment into koi dio huge cumulative burden right? So eto angle to ami keteo teneke bhaba nai karon to dekha na pae dekha poa na jai right. Now sector wise impact to saokson administrative buildings are long working hours, AC usage during hot summers, computers, servers, security systems, rising digital governance, more electricity needed, right? The digital governance are bahi goi ase rising hoy ase, so more electricity is needed. Healthcare 24/7 power is very much essential in healthcare, GMCH ho, TMCH ho, Dimrugarh Medical College ho, right? Assam Medical College, so everywhere. So bhawak like labs, diagnostics, ventilation, cold storage. So how much power is needed here? Electricity cost competes with spending on medicines, equipments, and patient care. And educational ক্ষেত্ৰত লাগিব obviously schools লাগিব colleges লাগিব university লাগিব fans, lights, computer labs, smart classrooms, libraries, water pumps, okay, water and sanitation pumping stations, treatment plants, monsoon operations, energy intensive services, right? So taking sector wise. Now electricity directly affects service delivery. Electricity নহলে কেনেকে service delivery to নহবই. So electricity is a medium, right? Structural problem in government spending. The editorial highlights a governance issue. Fragmented billing hoye ase, thousands of separate electricity accounts ase, no consolidated monitoring, low scrutiny, not debated like capital projects. Capital projects are jeneke highway hok or railway hok, but jikunu capital project eta hok, overbridge hok, Guwahati one overbridge also, they get debated, okay, but it is seen as a electricity spending is seen as a routine expenditure. Revenue go ase, no, right? No incentive to save. If a department reduces power use, savings go to central budget. Department does not benefit. So department to benefit নাই. So no behavioral changes. So মই আজি when switch off কৰিব লাগিব, মই off কৰিব লাগিব অফিসৰ তো এইটো নাহে behavioral changes এটা নাহে because এইটো যদি পইচা বাছে যদি ডিপাৰ্টমেণ্টে পায় যদি যিখিনি বচায় পইচা, so এইটো এটা নম হয়, এইটো এটা হেৰি ইনিচিয়েটিভ আনিব পাৰে গভৰ্ণমেণ্টে যে save electricity, keep in your pockets, keep in the department, okay, use for the betterment of the department. So যদি এইটো থাকে এইটো এটা মোটিভেট কৰিব ন, এইটো behavioral change এটা আনিব ন, right? So this could be a new thing. So lessons from UK and Europe. So UK আৰু ইউৰোপৰ পৰা আমি কি শিকিব পাৰো যে cities in UK editorial discuss কৰিছে যে cities in UK and Europe has similar challenges earlier. rising energy costs, limited budgets, expanding services, government services. Okay, their solution: treat public buildings as energy assets. Installed rooftop solar panels, generated electricity on site. White walk buildings operate during daytime. Solar matches uses. Okay, so buildings generally office buildings, government office buildings, daytime basically use hospital party. So solar matches uses. Okay, reduce grid dependency, lower bills over time, savings reinvested into public services. Created a cycle: solar savings, reinvestment, more solar, more savings. Okay, so this is a virtuous cycle. Why Assam is suitable in this context? So in Assam, thousands of public buildings, large unused rooftops, daytime uses aligns with solar generation. Rooftop solar already promoted in Assam also. Mukhyamantri Urja, Surya Urja. Households successfully using solar under PM Bijli Yojana. Logical next step to key over systematic solar adoption in government buildings. Now, institutional lesson. The editorial says that the key lesson is not technological, it is institutional. UK or Europe ki koile, je mapping of buildings koile. They prioritized high demand rooftops. Okay. Jotne ki electricity demand basic high demand ase. So hekita buildings of or it really try koile lowa bole solar power. Solar this panels. Okay. Bundle projects for cost efficiency and allow departments to decline savings. Jikhini savings hoy electricity basi jay. So hekhini kune thobo departments themselves. So energy management became strategic and not routine. So here ami shikibologia bahut ase UP model to save electricity from public buildings. Now okoman moi yate key facts kisuman disilo apnaloke sai lobo. The current energy mix, growing energy demand, world's third largest energy consumer India hoy. So India basis of ase data kita. So ekhini apnalok main short time obviously help koibo. 6 to 7% of global demand. Demand expected to double by 2040. Or coal or ami kiman hoy ase 46% of total energy main source obtained from coal energy. So that's a serious thing of concern. Karon ami coal use koi aso electricity generate koibo karon. Okay, 46% of total energy is being generated by coal power. Right. So coal powered energy ami use koi aso eneke electricity waste koi thakile. So serious things for our environment as well as we should be concerned about the sustainable development for our future generations also, right? So clean energy commitments ki ase 2030 target 500 gigawatt non-fossil fuel capacity, 2070 target net zero emissions, and current focus solar expansion and rooftop installations. PM Surya Ghar scheme. The challenges in power sector ki ase distribution issues, discom financial stress hota ase, high AT&C losses agoteo discuss koisilo, 17.6% in fiscal year 2024 versus 15.4% in fiscal year 23. The region's technical losses, commercial inefficiencies, okay, cross subsidies, delayed payments, reliability concerns, rainfall power cuts, safety precaution, not intentional load shedding, lines disconnected during heavy rains or storms to prevent electrocution accidents. Okay. Way forward, energy security equal to and directly relates to clean energy transition plus diversification plus self-reliance. So energy security 18 bostu ekelawat ahi jay. So immediate actions hame ki lobo lage: reduce coal dependence, cut imports from 24%, boost renewable reliability, fix discom finances, scale solar infrastructure. Eto badhabo lagibo 3000 megawatt projects in pipeline. Okay, plus rooftop expansion. Now, Assam's energy policy framework 2025 onwards. Thermal power promotion policy 2025 offers to investors free land, water, and road access up to 27% government equity, guaranteed power purchase, export option for surplus. Flexi project 3400 megawatt coal fired plant in Dhubri district. Renewable energy targets RPO, renewable purchase obligation. Nearly 30% of power from renewables. 2029-30 target to over 43% from renewables. Integrated clean energy policy 2025 target was 11,700 megawatt renewable capacity by 2030. Includes solar, wind, small hydro, battery storage, green hydrogen. Aims to make Assam a clean energy investment destination. And another framework for energy policy framework, legal and regulatory backing. Hydropowers and PPAs governed by Electricity Power Purchase Agency. Okay, governed by Electricity Act 2003, Central Electricity Authority norms, interstate PPA frameworks. Okay, national alignment follows central guidelines on resource adequacy, MOP 2020, Ministry of Power 2022. Okay, supports India's 2070 net zero goal. Sorry, okay, so it will have Assam's energy policy framework 2025 onwards. না কিছুমান হেৰি আছিলে পাৱাৰ পাৰ্চেজ অ'কে চৰি পাৱাৰ পাৰ্চেজ এগ্ৰিমেণ্ট কিন্তু PPP আছিলে মই আই থিংক আই গট মাৰ্কড আপ কিবা পাহৰি থাকিলোঁ অ'কে দিছ পাৱাৰ পাৰ্চেজ এগ্ৰিমেণ্ট তো এইখিনি কিছুমান টাৰ্ম আছে ইয়াতে যদি আপোনালোকে বুজি পায় তো তাৰ ডেফিনেশ্যন এইখিনি মই ইয়াতে লিখি দিছিলোঁ অ'কে চ' ৰিনিউৱেবল পাৰ্চেজ অব্লিগেশ্যন ইনষ্টল ভাৰ্চেছ ইফেক্টিভ কেপাচিটি এবাৰ পঢ়ি ল'ব হা থাৰ্মেল পাৱাৰ প্লান্ট হাইড্ৰ পাৱাৰ চ'লাৰ পাৱাৰ প্ৰকিউৰমেণ্ট জাষ্ট ৰিড দেম ওয়ান্স ঠিক আছে So based on this article, there is a main practice question which you can submit in our Telegram channel on the link provided in the description. Telegram channel to join kori lobo, link to diya jo ase description. Ebar sai lobo, check it once. Main practice question: energy governance is fiscal governance. So just read with me once. That energy governance is fiscal governance. Critically analyze this statement in the context of Assam's public administration and sustainable development goals. So just try koro. Anything you write. Thank you for today. Aji karni mane asle.